worship the God who is. We worship the God who evermore will be. He opened the prison doors. He parted the raging sea. My God, He holds the victory. There's joy in the house of the Lord. There's joy in the house of the Lord today. And we won't be quiet. We shout out your praise. There's joy in the house of the Lord. Our God is surely in this place. And we won't be quiet. We shout out your praise. Oh, oh, oh. We shout out your praise. Oh, oh, oh. We sing to the God who hears. We sing to the God who saves. We sing to the God who always makes a way. 'Cause He hung upon that cross, then He rose up from that grave. My God, still rolling stones away. There's joy in the house of the Lord. There's joy in the house of the Lord today. And we won't be quiet. We shout out your praise. There's joy in the house of the Lord. Our God is surely in this place. We won't be quiet. We shout out your praise. 'Cause we were the beggars, now we're royalty. We were the prisoners, now we're running free. We are forgiven, accepted, redeemed by His grace. Let the house of the Lord sing praise. We're the beggars, now we're royalty. We were the prisoners, now we're running free. We are forgiven, accepted, redeemed by His grace. Let the house of the Lord sing praise. There's joy in the house of the Lord. There's joy in the house of the Lord today. And we won't be quiet. We shout out your praise. There's joy in the house of the Lord. Our God is surely in this place. And we won't be quiet. We shout out your praise. There's joy in the house of the Lord. There's joy in the house of the Lord today. And we won't be quiet. We shout out your praise. There's joy in the house of the Lord. Our God is surely in this place. We won't be quiet. We shout out your praise. Oh, oh, oh. We shout out your praise. Oh, oh, oh. bursting through the clouds, black and white, turn to color all around. All is new in the Savior I am found. See the sun now bursting through the clouds, black and white, turn to color all around. All is new in the Savior I am found. This is living now. This is living now. Take me higher than I've been before. It's your perfect love that saves me sore. God, your freedom is an open door. You are everything I want and more.
That's the end of the song.
Hi friends, welcome back. Happy 11th of July. I don't know how that happened, but it did. And we are here for more about the life of Paul. We have this week, next week, and then one more. And then we're done. And we move on to study someone else in the Bible. But I want to start off with a question, okay? Here's my question. Do you have a favorite hero? Superhero, I don't know. Firefighters and police officers are heroes too. So like maybe they're those, whatever. But like surely you have a favorite, right? I would love to know what it is, so feel free to let me know at some point. But I have a favorite hero. It is Elastigirl from The Incredibles, because she can stretch, and that's pretty cool, right? Like you see her interacting as a mom, and it's like, wow, look at you just like reaching around and grabbing things and pulling and moving, and it's pretty cool. I also have a favorite supervillain, which has nothing to do with what we're going to talk about today, but I enjoy her more than any other person in the superhero world, and it is Maleficent. She is totally cool because Homegirl can turn into a dragon at will, like whenever she wants, just boom, dragon. She uses it for evil, which is kind of a bummer, but really cool superpower to have. But right, like we have heroes, some of them superheroes, right? Superman, Batman, Elastigirl, Mr. Incredible, whatever. But then we also have heroes, right, that are like firefighters and, you know, EMTs and doctors, right? People that do heroic acts. The dictionary definition of hero is this person that is admired for achievement and noble qualities. They're someone who shows great courage. So they're like a good person who does cool things. But one of my favorite authors, he chooses a slightly different definition. He says that a hero is someone who stands tall when others shrink back. When everyone else is turning the other direction, right? A hero is going to stand firm where they're at. Now, there are lots of people in the Bible that fit this description, right? David, I love David, right? He stood tall quite literally against the giant that was Goliath. When the army of Israel had turned and run the other direction, David stood there because he knew that no human, no man who defied the armies of the living God should continue to live. So he stood his ground against a literal giant. Very cool. Esther, also in the Old Testament, she stood tall. We'll talk about her in a couple weeks, but she stood tall against the evil Haman and the king when her people were being threatened with extermination. She wouldn't back down, even if it meant her life coming to an end. Daniel, he's another cool one, right? Stood tall against the king of Babylon on several occasions. And one time, later on in his life, he refused to bow down to the king and worship him, and it resulted in him being thrown in the lion's den. which everyone thought was certain death, but Daniel didn't care about that, right? There are lots more that we could keep going through the Old Testament and the New Testament and talk through these people who are biblical heroes. And in today's story, we can count Paul amongst their ranks because he stands tall in the face of adversity. All along, right, we've been describing Paul as this man of grit and this man of grace. Grace because of this encounter he had with Jesus on the road to Damascus, and grit because of his determination to spread the gospel no matter the cost to himself. So today, we're going to go through a lot. Today and next week, we're going to go through a lot. So be prepared, but don't worry, they're like cool stories. So, beginning where we left off in chapter 21 of the book of Acts, we have Paul coming back from this final missionary journey that he went on, and he's returned home, right, to Jerusalem, and he received this super warm welcome from the people. Well, some of the people were happy he was there. About a week after he arrived in Jerusalem, he's greeted by some not super nice people who aren't his biggest fans. So, chapter 21, verse 27 says, 7 days were almost ended when some Jews from the province of Asia saw Paul in the temple and roused a mob against him. They grabbed him, yelling, "Men of Israel, help us! This is the man who preaches against our people everywhere and tells everybody to disobey the Jewish laws. He speaks against the temple and even defiles this holy place by bringing in Gentiles," right? Okay, so these Jews from Asia, whatever that means, had followed Paul hundreds of miles back to Jerusalem from up north by Greece, because they disliked what he said that much. They hated him with such a passion that they decided to follow him back to his own home to continue to make his life miserable. But they didn't stop with just saying mean things, saying things that weren't true about him, starting riots over who he was. They keep going, and they decide to have him arrested. So, as is custom, Paul is put before the high council in Jerusalem for a trial. And we're going to go through the whole thing today. So, chapter 22 of the book of Acts, starting in verse 30. The next day, the commander ordered the leading priests into session with the Jewish high council. He wanted to find out what the trouble was all about, so he released Paul to have him stand before them. Okay, Paul, let's hear what you've got to say. Gazing intently at the high council, Paul began, "Brothers, I've always lived before God with a clear conscience." And he keeps going for a while, and he goes into this whole speech about how what's being said about him isn't true, and he fills in the facts where all of the other people told lies, and they don't like it, okay? So they decide he needs to continue on in this trial process, right? So the high council's like, "Okay, we're going to send you to the governor." So they send him to the governor. But before he gets there, right? So later that evening, this is what verse 11 of chapter 23 says. That night, the Lord appeared to Paul and said, "Be encouraged, Paul." Right? You just had this pretty rough day, right? People are saying things that aren't true about you, and you've essentially been thrown in jail now. But be encouraged. Just as you have been witness to me here in Jerusalem, you must preach the good news in Rome as well. So Paul is feeling pretty good about what lies ahead for him. He has now been promised, right, that hey, be encouraged. No matter what is about to happen, you're going to get to Rome. That's really important to keep in mind. See, because going to Rome and preaching the gospel is kind of like going to the White House and telling the president about Jesus. Nero, who is the Roman emperor at the time, is the most powerful man in the world at this time. And God has just promised Paul that he's going to get an audience in Rome. The Mecca of people. He never said how it was going to happen. He never said when it was going to happen, but he promised, Paul, you are going to Rome. So, keep reading. In verse 12, this is Luke continues, the next morning, a group of Jews got together and bound themselves with an oath not to eat or drink until they had killed Paul. So this is like escalated from like a mob in the streets to an arrest to a trial to like, okay, we just need to kill him, right? This is sounding very familiar. There were more than 40 of them in this conspiracy, and they went to the leading priests and elders and told them, we've bound ourselves with an oath to eat nothing until we've killed Paul. So you and the high council should ask the commander to bring Paul back to the council again. Pretend you want to examine his case more fully. We'll kill him on the way. So they have like this whole big plan about how they're going to kill Paul en route so they could just like be done with him, right? They're mean business, right? They're not just like disliking Paul anymore. They just want him dead. Nothing else will satisfy them. They're not going to eat or drink. It's like a lot to rest on. But the plan didn't work out, okay? Super great, really cool, because someone warned Paul about what was going to happen. And then we pick up in verse 23. It says, then the commander, it's the guy, the Roman officer in charge of protecting Paul and escorting him from place to place, called 2 of his officers and ordered, get 200 soldiers ready to leave for Caesarea at 9 o'clock tonight. Also take 200 spearmen and 70 mounted troops, provide horses for Paul to ride, and get him safely to Governor Felix. Then he wrote a letter to the governor, and Paul was sent on his way. Okay, Governor Felix, this is the next person we have to interact with. He is one of the successors of Pontius Pilate, who was governor of Judah. Do you remember who that is? Pilate was the governor when Jesus was killed. Pilate was actually the guy that ultimately decided for Jesus to be crucified because, Pilate was this people pleaser and killing Jesus would please all people, and so he just did it. Well, Felix is no different. He throws around these empty accusations and this unfair criticism. He's known for being super greedy, and he is also a huge people pleaser. He was born this like slave and then rose through the ranks, right, through like his own grit and determination. And, he was ruthless. And so he rose to power to become governor. Super great guy, right? So he's the judge over this trial, which like doesn't fill us with any kind of great feelings. But there's another person here, right? So it's not just Felix, right? We don't just have like a judge. We also have like a defense, which is Paul. And then we have like a prosecution. And there's a lawyer here, and his name is Tertullus, which is a funny name. And he's no better than Felix. Paul just like can't win. So Tertullus is super deceitful. He's a crooked lawyer, and he'll do anything to like make Felix happy. He'll say anything, whether it be true or not. And in his opening argument, he says all of these like really terrible and super untrue things about Paul. And praises Felix in the process to like, hey, this guy is not good, but Felix, you're great, right? So then Paul, right, as is custom, is given this chance to give his own opening argument. So he has just heard Tertullus throw him under the bus and drive the bus over and back, right? And then this is how Paul responds in chapter 24, verse 10. The governor motioned for Paul to speak. Paul said, I know, sir, that you've been a judge of Jewish affairs for many years, so I gladly present my defense before you. You can quickly discover that I arrived in Jerusalem no more than 12 days ago to worship at the temple. My accusers never found me arguing with anyone in the temple, nor stirring up a riot in any synagogue, or on the streets of the city. These men cannot prove the things that they are accusing me of. Okay, so Paul is like super cool and calm and collected, right? He is like not getting caught up in the emotion of like someone throwing you under the bus and saying terrible things about you. He simply tells the truth about the situation. He is resting on the truth of what has happened to him throughout his entire life, in the way that like God is orchestrating and controlling all things. He is cool under pressure. So Paul, he goes through this whole process, right? Totally lackadaisical, like, it's okay. I'm going to tell you the truth. What you choose to believe is up to you. I know God's got this. And he continues to speak truth about who he is and what's been going on. Felix just like doesn't want to hear it. And so he like throws him in jail. And every once in a while, when he like needs a kick or a giggle, right, he'll like pull Paul back out and be like, hey, tell me your story. And then he throws Paul back in jail. Well, this goes on, right? We're going to read in verse 27. This is what happens with Felix and Paul. After 2 years went by like this, Felix was succeeded by Festus. And because Felix wanted to gain favor with the Jewish people, he left Paul in prison. So for 2 years, that's kind of a long time, Paul just like sits in jail. And then Felix like quits his job. And he's like, never mind, I'm done. But like leaves Paul in jail. Felix is like the human equivalent of a weasel. He doesn't want to deal with this problem, so he shoves it under the rug and then runs away. So after Felix, right, we read that this guy named Festus takes over. I don't know why these people have such interesting names. But he's now the governor. He's not all that much better than Felix. He's another people pleaser who's also like a weasel. He didn't want to make a decision about Paul. And so I'm not going to like read through all of chapter 25, but he like calls in King Agrippa. So you have like the emperor, right, who's like ruling over all of the Roman Empire. And then you have like these kings over Judah, right? They're like Jewish people, but they're like really more Roman than they are Jewish. So they're like bad Jews. And that's King Agrippa. And then under the king, there's like governors, and the governors are like fully Roman. They're not Jewish usually. And so we have Festus, who's a governor, fully Roman, no Jewish heritage. And then you have Agrippa, who is more Jew than he is Roman. Very confusing, but important to remember. So King Agrippa gets called in, and I have this like cool little, I got really confused when I was trying to figure out who King Agrippa was, because his name is King Herod Agrippa II. And that's kind of a lot. And I was like, King Herod, like that, there's lots of Herods in the Bible. I wonder if they're all related. And I found this cool family tree that I'll show you that explains it all. So here it is. King Agrippa, like I said, is actually King Herod Agrippa II. And he is the great-grandson of Herod the Great. Herod the Great, if you look right at the very top of the thing, he's the one who tried to kill baby Jesus. Same guy, okay? And then, he had all of these wives, and then they gave him all these kids, and then his kids had kids, and King Herod Agrippa I is one of those kids, and he had a kid with Herodias who tried to kill John the Baptist, which is like another whole story, very, very cool. Anyways, King Herod Agrippa I had a son and 2 daughters. Okay, you see that all the way at the bottom? King Herod Agrippa II was the son. That's the guy in our story with Paul. But then he had 2 daughters, Berenice and Drusilla. Now, Drusilla, this is just like a fun little fact. Drusilla, do you see that? Was like married to Felix at some point, who left Paul in prison. This whole family is super messed up. But that's who King Herod Agrippa II is. Great-grandchild of King Herod the Great, who tried to kill Jesus. So, like, clearly, the devil is using this whole family to, like, put a stop to, the spreading of the gospel, which is a cool lesson in and of itself. But we don't have time for that today because we have a lot to get through. So, he's got a lot of great things going for him, right? This King Herod Agrippa II. He's got this whole family tree of people who, tried to stop the gospel and failed time and time again, right? The execution of James and the imprisonment of Peter and the wife who hated John the Baptist. I mean, it's just like a lot. But whole family, incredibly messed up. They have terrible morals, and they're just like generally really bad people. They need Jesus. They're trying to kill Jesus, so it's not going to work. But this is the family history of the guy, right, who will decide the fate of Paul. So King Agrippa, he has no reason not to kill Paul, right? He had a whole family tree, right, backing him up of like killing servants of the Lord all the way back, right, to attempting to kill the Messiah himself. But for whatever reason, divine intervention, change in morals, I don't know, Agrippa gives Paul a chance. And he's like, okay, this is what I've heard from the other side. Paul, let's hear what you have to say. So in verse 9 of chapter 26, guys, we're making great progress. This is what Paul says to King Agrippa. I used to believe that I ought to do everything I could to oppose the very name of Jesus the Nazarene. Indeed, I did just that in Jerusalem. Authorized by the leading priest, I caused many believers there to be sent to prison. I cast my vote against them when they were condemned to death. Many times I had them punished in the synagogues to get them to curse Jesus. I was so violently opposed to them that I even chased them down in foreign cities. And he continues on and he tells his entire testimony to King Agrippa, the second most powerful man around, right? Because it's emperor, king, governor. And he is telling this story about how he had an amazing encounter with Jesus and it forever changed his life. Paul walks away from this encounter with King Agrippa and he challenges the king's thinking on Christianity, on Jesus, on God, all of it. And here's what we learn from Paul. Now, I don't know what happened to King Agrippa, but he heard the gospel. And we're all called to share that same story, right? Not like the Damascus story, but like your version of it, right? You have a story about how Jesus came into your life, about how he changed your life, about how he made it better, about how he's continuing to work in your life. And, you may think it doesn't sound super cool, right? Like you weren't killing Christians and then God got a hold of you on a road and blinded you for 3 days and then, right? Probably didn't happen to you. Didn't happen to me. You may think it's not super exciting, but it's your story. And God gave you your story in your life so that you could go and tell people about it because your story matters. When Jesus, what he's done in your life, it matters. So go and tell people about it, right? That's what we learn from Paul right here, is you tell anyone who will listen what your story is about how Jesus came into your life and changed you for the better. Because when you tell your story, it changes other people's lives. And then they can have a story of their own. So go. I'm not going to pray over you. Go. Tell your story to other people. Because it matters, right? So go. With that, here's a blessing. May the Lord bless you, keep you, cause his face to shine upon you, and give you peace as you go and tell people your story. I'll see you guys next week. Bye, friends.